How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Greetings and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across America this Open Line Friday. Glad to have you with me. 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777 for the live stream, the podcast, the show notes, everything you need, including the social media links, where I'll be doing lots of cooking this weekend, so you can... My son wants to make cannolis this weekend. We have to begin with Don Lemon. He has been arrested. A federal grand jury indicted him. Now, let me back up here. A federal magistrate judge refused to just sign off on an arrest on Don Lemon a couple weeks ago. And the judge, who's a conservative judge, was vilified by the right for not giving them what they wanted at the time. But his point was sound that given that Don Lemon claimed to be a journalist, there needed to be a little more than what the feds just claimed. And so they went out, they got a grand jury, they took in testimony, and now Don Lemon has been arrested and indicted. This is a good thing. At this point, the American left and press together have decided that unless you are, quote unquote, right coded, anyone other than someone on the right, if you hold up a camera or a cell phone and click record in the commission of a crime, well, you're a reporter and no one can touch you. If you go rob a bank and you film yourself robbing the bank, CNN is going to insist that you have been wrongly imprisoned because you are exercising your First Amendment rights. That's the absurdity of the position where we are. We're talking, of course, about City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota, where Don Lemon and a bunch of progressive activists invaded the church during their worship service on a Sunday. I want to read for you from Matt Finn, a Fox News reporter who is covering the situation and what the victims reported. Victim 4 informed agents that members of their parish attempted to retrieve their children from the child care area located downstairs, but agitators were blocking the chairs, preventing the stairs, preventing the parents from getting to their children. Victim 4 informed agents the aisles are already narrow to begin with, and the agitators who occupied the center of the sanctuary made it nearly impossible for parishioners to get out and leave. Victim 5 expressed fear the agitators may have guns underneath their jackets. When the agitators began shouting, the parishioners could hear the word shoot. Victim 4 recalled one agitator was threatened, aggressive, and intimidating toward parishioners. Additionally, the agitator was screaming and getting in people's faces, to include women and young children. The agitator continued to scream in the faces of young children while they were crying. One affidavit wrote agitators, quote, forced parishioners to flee the church out of the side door, which resulted in one female victim falling and suffering an injury. These are federal affidavits from 10 days ago. The press is in a full meltdown today about Don Lemon claiming freedom of the press, freedom of the press. You know, many reporters think freedom of the press only applies to them. They're very arrogant about the freedom of the press when it actually applies to all of us. What essentially the press is going through Calvin Ball, and you do need to understand Calvin Ball. Calvin borrowed from Calvin and Hobbes, where essentially there were no rules. The rules were always changing, so Calvin could always win the game. On January 6, 2021, a number of people stormed into the United States Capitol, recording the events, claiming that they were journalists documenting the events. A number of them, I believe 6 of them, were indicted by federal courts, and not a single member of the press gave a damn because they were right-coded. But Don Lemon, a gay black man who is a progressive activist podcaster, suddenly, because he used to be on CNN, the media is all in high dungeons about what happened to Don Lemon and how this is an invasion of the press and this undermines the press. You want to know how quickly this came to be? The grand jury was impaneled yesterday. And he has been indicted and now arrested. That's how quickly it was. If you talk to members of the church, and by the way, this is the thing that is galling to me, is that the journalists, from the reporters at CNN to MSNBC to the podcast hosts to the written press who are all upset about this, they don't even understand freedom of religion. I mean, none of these people understand Christian denominations, what the main line is versus the mainstream, what evangelicalism. None of them know anything about religion in this country, and they really don't know a whole lot about freedom of the press and responsibilities. They just think if I'm a member of the press, I can get away with it. Not a single one of them bothered to interview individuals involved in the church. If the reporters who are upset about Don Lemon getting indicted had bothered to talk to the people who were in the church that day, they would know that Don Lemon was asked to leave repeatedly. He refused to leave, and he did more than just cover it. They say he was an active participant in the protest. A protest that violated the FACE Act, which is a federal law that prohibits interference with someone's right to worship. So, the media always wants to talk to all the people. Let's get all sides of the story. But here, they don't care about the victims' stories. They don't care about the victims who have said Don Lemon was an active participant in the protest. They don't care that the victims believe Don Lemon was not just there covering it as a reporter, but was actively with them. Remember, Don Lemon deleted video footage, though the internet lasts forever, ahead of time, knowing where the press was going to go. As a friend of mine who's somewhat sympathetic to the press argument says, if you're riding around with the Ku Klux Klan burning crosses in people's front yards claiming to cover it, you may get out of it with the jury, but don't be surprised when you get arrested. Another friend of mine pointed out there was a French comedy a number of years ago, sarcastic comedy, about reporters who followed around a serial killer to document his crimes. And by the end of the movie, the reporters are active participants helping the serial killer murder people so they can document it for their documentary on serial killers. This is the thing that just really gets me about Brian Stelter and his coverage at CNN on this. Just the hyperbole of people at MSNBC today. They couldn't care less what the people in the church have said. They're not interested in the truth. They're not interested in the facts. They're not interested in what the congregants in the church observe. They're not interested in any of that. Their position is because Don Lemon's a member of the press, he can't be arrested. It's like, Alex Preddy was holding up his camera. And I said Alex Preddy was not, in my view, looking at the end of his life, wasn't the aggressor there, but he very clearly had been prior to that aggressive, including over a week before. Holding up his camera and videotaping is not an issue. He had the right to do that, but actually getting involved in the protest and trying to break up ICE, smashing the back bumper of a car, spitting on ICE agents, that's not covering, that's not observing, that's actually being an agitator. Don Lemon covering people storming into a church, that's Don Lemon being a journalist. Don Lemon going into the church, being asked to leave, refusing to leave, and according to congregants in the church, participating with the protesters. That's not being a journalist. That goes beyond being a journalist. And the press is not honest. The ratings for news channels are collapsing in this country. Subscription rates are down, and no member of the press, led, I got to tell you, by guys like Oliver Darcy and Brian Stelter, who cover the media, have zero introspection. They have no self-reflection on why the media is in collapse. They circle the wagons. They defend the liberal press. They attack Fox News and conservative outlets. They have no care for a conservative journalist arrested. But Don Lemon, oh my God, this is like a war crime. You cannot trust the American press corps to cover the press corps accurately. Look at the meltdown at the Washington Post over Jeff Bezos and the layoffs. That he's a bad steward of the Washington. He's the owner of the Washington Post, you idiots. It's a for-profit entity, and you're not making him money, so you got to deal with it. Look at the outrage in the press over Bari Weiss reforming CBS News. She had the audacity to tell them if they can't make money, they're going to get shut down. How dare you suggest that? You people in the media are not sacred, you're not holy, and you're not in a business that's above it all. You just think you are. You think your poop doesn't smell. You think Don Lemon is righteous because he's a progressive journalist when the people in the church say he went beyond covering it and participated in what the agitators inside the church were doing. He actually videotaped himself with the pastor where the pastor is telling him to leave, and he has the audacity to lecture the pastor on the First Amendment after having trespassed into the church. Remember, Don Lemon also deleted footage, put it online, and then started deleting it. Yes, the legal implications were there that he was deleting the footage. Many people saved the footage that he deleted. And the American press corps will not be honest with it. In fact, I'm sure some of them will text me and take issue with what I'm saying. I don't care. Don Lemon deserved to be arrested, and I hope Don Lemon goes to prison. And you people in the press should learn your place. You think you're above it all. You like to quote, "No one is above the law," but you imply that you yourselves think you are above the law. You're not, and you should go to prison if you storm into a church and disrupt a church service. And that is what Don Lemon participated in. He wasn't covering it. He went into the church, was asked to leave, and instead of leaving, started lecturing people about his First Amendment rights. What about their First Amendment rights that Don Lemon impeded? You people in the press can't keep lecturing the rest of us that no one is above the law when every time something comes up with you people, you're like, "Oh, we're above the law. You can't touch us." Yes, you can. He's getting his comeuppance, and the rest of you should too. This is why no one trusts you. This is why no one likes you. This is why your ratings are down. This is why your subscribers are down. This is why you're closing newspapers around the country, because you can't be honest. A free people need a free press, and you people aren't free. You are captured by your biases and prejudices against the right, against conservatives, against Christians. You can't cover it honestly. You're ignorant when it comes to covering religion in this country. You simply can't do it. And now one of your beloved members of the press corps, who's only beloved because he's a gay black man on the left, where he on the right, you would be right there cheering on his arrest. And you know it's true. You know it's true. Look at the journalists who were arrested on January 6th that you continue to say brought it on themselves. You know it's true. A jury will settle this. Maybe he's found not guilty by a Minnesota jury. It's likely, you know. It's likely. But I got to tell you, it's wild that you people are defending this instead of even bothering to listen to the congregants in the church and what the eyewitnesses in the church, the victims, said. And some of you are spinning this, claiming that a prosecutor said there was no evidence. Actually, there was evidence. It was caught on film. A lot of people saw it for themselves. An appellate court said there was probable cause to arrest Don Lemon. A grand jury has indicted him. And now he's been arrested. The system is working. What you people in the press hate is that it's working against you. Frankly, it should work against you more often. You've gotten arrogant, out of touch, elite, and you are captured by your prejudices, and this should take you down a notch, but it won't, and you'll continue to be in decline. Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. I am delighted to have you with me wherever you may be, and I hope you're ready for a weekend and that you will stay warm. Around the country, there are walkouts in schools today. The Democratic Party in Cobb County, Georgia, which is one of the big suburban counties north of Atlanta, is actively encouraging kids to walk out of classes. Progressive groups are, and there have been marches around the country. I want to read you the organizer of the march to protest ICE in Middle Georgia. This is their About section. We are socialists because we reject an economic order based on private profit, alienated labor, gross inequalities of wealth and power, discrimination based on race, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, status, age, religion, and natural origin, and brutality and violence in defense of the status quo. We are socialists because we share a vision of a humane social order based on population or popular control of resources and production, economic planning, equitable distribution, feminism, racial equality, and non-oppressive relationships. We are socialists because we are developing a concrete strategy for achieving that vision, for building a majority movement that will make democratic socialism a reality in America. We believe that such a strategy must acknowledge the class structure of American society, and that the class structure means that there is a basic conflict of interest between those sectors with enormous economic power and the vast majority of the population. That is the About page for the activist group that organized an anti-ICE march in my area of the country. They're communists. And the communist agitators, they call themselves democratic socialists in this country, and the press that gives Don Lemon a pass gives the democratic socialist communists a pass. My goodness gracious. There you have it. In this country, we have a bunch of communist agitators encouraging people to go on strike today. For kids, they wanted the school shut down during COVID. Now they want the kids to walk into school. They're not about educating kids and making them smarter. They're about indoctrinating them and bringing them into the cause. These people actually hate the United States of America, and they're trying to fester that hate, even in places like Middle Georgia. If you want to participate in the strike, good riddance, and I hope you stay home a very long time so the rest of us don't have to deal with you. The rest of you want to be productive and have your businesses productive, you should call Vision Computers at 404-COMPUTE and see if they can help you with your company and keeping you productive, keeping your employees productive. If you call them at 404-COMPUTE or go to visioncomputers.com, they can build you new computers. And by the way, their IT support comes with the computers. They can upgrade your existing computers. They can actually take your existing computer and they can move it to a newer, better computer. As long as everything's Windows 11 compliant, everything transfers over, macros and everything, exactly like you have it. So you're not skipping a beat. And then you get a special phone number where you can call them, and in 15 seconds or less, you get an actual human being on the line to help you if you ever need tech support. I was talking to a buddy of mine out in California yesterday saying you can give them a call at 404-COMPUTE, and they'll take care of you. Anybody in the United States, 404-COMPUTE, they'll take care of you. 404-COMPUTE, visioncomputers.com. Reach out to Vision Computers and see if they can help you. So I got to play you some audio from the Don Lemon church invasion, and I don't have the video for this, but my buddy Caleb Howell put up the audio. Well, actually, he put up the video. I just can't get it for you right here. But just listen to this exchange with Don Lemon at City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota.
How do you feel about allegedly, according to the protesters here, there's a member of ICE who is a pastor here or is a member of the clergy?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
A member of the clergy or a pastor here is works with ICE, and that's why they're upset.
I didn't know that.
Allegedly, I don't know. That's what they say.
Okay, well, I would say before just ramming into a church, maybe it'd be good to get some more information first.
Yeah.
But you said talking is the answer, right?
Yeah.
Well, then maybe instead of making assumptions, it'd be good to ask the person first before making that assumption, then going into their church.
Yes. Wow. Funny how that works. Funny how that works. Okay, now look, it's an open line Friday, and the phone number is 877-973-7425. But I've got to actually engage you guys on an issue first before I take phone calls. This is actually really important. A friend of mine emailed me last night and said, can you explain why the federal judge in Minnesota is looking at holding Todd Lyons, the head of ICE, in contempt for a series of failures to respond to various court cases? I was like, let me look into this. Now, I got to say this on the record because I know how some of you react. You know, I'm a longtime supporter of deportations, and I think that if you're an illegal alien, you should be deported. I do think that we should prioritize not just the gangbangers and the criminals, but anyone who came across the border in the last 5 years under the Biden administration, the 11 million. We should prioritize getting all of you out of the country because you're fresh and documented. And then we can go look at the people who've been here for 30, 40, 50 years. Start with the last 5 years because those are 11 million people. And they include the gang members and the criminals and the would-be criminals. So start there. And then once you got those done, we can work back from there. But let's start there. Why? Because these people, we know them, they have a paper trail, and then there are also the gotaways, the people who have showed up and there's no record of them being in the country. They sneak past ICE. Prioritize getting rid of those people too. Let me explain to you how badly Kristy Noem and Gregory Bovino screwed this up, because this is going to have ramifications for the president's policies. And you need to know, because here's what I'm seeing happen now. People in the Department of Homeland Security and Department of Justice orbits are attacking the federal judge in Minnesota, who was a George W. Bush appointee, who's actually a pretty respected judge. And they're attacking him. They're blasting him, saying that he's a liberal or he's a progressive. And they're ignoring what the judge has found. So I took the time last night. There's a website called Pacer. And Pacer is the website where all federal litigation is filed on Pacer. So you can get all the motions, you can get the complaints, you can get the answers, you can get all of the documentation, you can get the court orders, everything in Pacer. So I have a Pacer account, having been a lawyer, and I went in and I started pulling documents and I started reading. Some of them I saw reporters were putting up judicial orders, so I found those cases and I went in and started looking. I can't begin to explain to you how badly Kristy Noem and Greg Bovino screwed up, and the fall guy is going to be Todd Lyons. Let me explain to you what happened. And by the way, you don't have to take my word for this. If you're a lawyer, you can get into Pacer, go to the District of Minnesota. They don't have a northern, southern district. They got one big district for Minnesota. You can start pulling these cases yourself, and you can read the filings. And you can say, well, the filings are biased except for what's not there. And what's not there is very critical. Here's how Kristy Noem and Gregory Bovino screwed this up. And I need to start by saying this. I have a number of friends who are big fans of Gregory Bovino's mass roundups. And they think it's what's needed. They think we need to get as many people out of here as quickly as possible. And they see that, and they like what Bovino did, and they're blaming lots of other people for undoing what Bovino did. But here's the problem. We're a nation of laws and not men, and it is very clear that Gregory Bovino, Kristy Noem of the Department of Homeland Security did not comply with the laws. So here's what's happened according to these complaints in federal court. A lot of the people that Bovino rounded up and put in detention facilities should be deported. Some of the people have permission to be in the United States. And it's not the permission of go wander the United States and wait until we resolve your case. It is, we believe you probably have legitimate refugee or asylum status, so you can come into the country while your claims are pending. Bovino has rounded up those people too. He's also rounded up people who don't have final deportation orders and put them into detention facilities. Now, you can say, well, they are illegal aliens. They should be deported. Yes, but we have a process in this country that binds the left, the right, the Republican, the Democrat, the government, you and me. And they ignored the process. And what I mean by that is what's not in the filings. Responses from the Department of Justice. Responses from the local U.S. Attorney's Office. Bovino arrested so many people and put them in detention facilities, and one of the things you got to have is a plan for deportation. You can't just round up an illegal alien and put him in a detention facility and hold him there indefinitely. You have to have a plan for deportation, because otherwise what happens? You're putting him in a detention facility, and you and I are paying for those people. We're paying for their housing. We're paying for their food. We're paying for the power to keep the lights on and the air going. We're paying for them. And Bovino essentially created this ghetto to put these people in, and you and I have been paying for them because there was never a deportation plan. And for those of you who support deportations and support what Bovino was doing to deport, fun fact for you, he didn't actually have a plan for deportations. So why is Todd Lyons, the head of ICE, in trouble for this? Because Kristy Noem elevated Gregory Bovino above his superiors to do something that Gregory Bovino wasn't actually empowered to do. He was in charge of one section in California. Kristy Noem made him a commandant at large, which was a made-up title, not approved by Congress, and empowered him to go to Minnesota and do these things. But actually, ICE is the group that handles deportations. The Border Patrol, for which Bovino is in charge of, is to prevent people from coming across the border. ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is in charge of deportations. So Kristy Noem elevated a Border Patrol agent to be in charge of deportations, but deportations are actually handled by ICE. They cut ICE out of the process, but because under the law it's ICE that handles the deportations, it's Todd Lyons who's in trouble in court, not Gregory Bovino, because it's actually ICE that's supposed to process the deportations. Now, there's a next step in this. They overwhelmed the system. There are only so many judges and there are only so many lawyers in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And about half the lawyers in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Minnesota have either quit or are planning to quit. Why? Because the proper process wasn't followed, and they don't want to put their names on documents in court claiming the process was followed when it wasn't. Let's jump out of Minnesota and jump over to California to the case I told you about last week. An Iranian immigrant was rounded up by Bovino's team in Southern California. She had been in the country since 1979 with the Iranian Revolution. In 1989, an immigration judge ordered her deported. Then the Department of Homeland Security, or at the time, whatever it was, in charge of it, said, no, wait, actually, she can stay. And you're going to have to report every 3 months to immigration officials. So she stayed. Fast forward to the end of the Bush administration, 2008, she was given a permission to work. She filed for permission to work. She had married, had kids, her husband had job circumstance changes. She needed to go work. ICE gave her permission to go work. So she's been working and every 3 months reporting. And in February of this past year, she went for her regular report, and ICE, or actually Border Patrol, detained her. And the Border Patrol said she was going to be deported. She still, well, up until last Friday, was still in detention. Why? Because the Border Patrol was supposed to have a deportation plan before arresting her, and they didn't. They put her in prison last February. She's been incarcerated since last February, and they've never taken steps to deport her. Not only that, when they arrested her, she had a heart condition. They wouldn't let her take her heart medicine with her, or they lost it and never replaced it. She wasn't given medical care. She's been struggling in this detention facility. That's one, inhumane, and two, violates the procedure. So a judge has now released her. And here's the interesting part about it. Immigration's, Customs, and Border Patrol didn't dispute anything the judge found, but they still wouldn't release the woman without a court ordering the release. Now, that's documented. That's happened. I've read the file. I'm not making that up. They admitted they didn't have a plan to deport her. They admitted she's been there for a year. They admitted she was in poor health. They admitted she had prior permission to stay in the country. And they admitted We're not going to let her go unless a judge ordered it. Now go back to Minnesota. I keep telling you what's not in the file. Responses from the U.S. Attorney's Office. These people are filing habeas corpus petitions demanding that they be shown cause for why they should be detained, and the Justice Department hasn't responded to a lot of them. That's why Todd Lyons, because he's actually in charge of ICE, is being called today to see why he shouldn't be held in contempt. They've detained all these people and then haven't responded to any of the legal pleadings. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota has been telling sympathetic conservative reporters, by the way, conservative reporters, that they can't respond because a number of the people Bovino detained should not have been detained. They've been holding people in these detention facilities that the law says shouldn't be there because they've been given permission to be in the country, like the Iranian woman in Southern California. I'm not making this up. These are the legal filings. And when you swear or attest something in court is true, it better be true or you're going to jail. And these people and their lawyers are filing stuff saying, my client had permission to be in the country, and that permission was not revoked before they were detained. So the permission's still valid. And by the way, Homeland Security has not taken the steps to revoke the permissions. If you want people to leave this country because they came into the country without our permission, therefore broke the law, you sure as hell should want the people in charge to be following the law to get those people out of the country. But that's the problem. Bovino and Noem did not follow the law. And Todd Lyons is going to be held responsible because ICE is the one that's actually in charge of deportations, not Border Patrol. They've set Todd Lyons up to be the fall guy. Now, what was Todd Lyons' objection to Bovino's plan? That you would overwhelm the system, you would round up people who shouldn't be rounded up, and you didn't have enough judges and lawyers to be able to process that many people at once. So what did Lyons want to do? He wanted to start with the criminals and the gangs and the recent arrivals from the Biden administration that weren't supposed to be here and had deportation orders. And Lyons and Tom Homan argued if you start there, you won't run into these legal problems. Kristy Noem and Gregory Bovino and Corey Lewandowski and Stephen Miller, they ignored all of that, did a mass roundup of illegal aliens, and they screwed up the law. I mean, this is the thing that blows my mind. And again, I'm not making this up. These have been filed in court. Judges have looked into it. They are agreeing. In many cases, the U.S. attorneys are not responding or they're agreeing with the judge's findings, like the case in California, that we have, in fact, rounded people up and put them in detention facilities without a plan to deport them. And some of the people who are rounded up should not have been there. You should be outraged if you're a Trump supporter, not at the judges, but at the screw up because it undermines our arguments for deportation. The clown show that Kristy Noem has presided over directly undermines the president's ability to deport these people. And judges are looking on this and they're becoming more and more skeptical, and it's slowing the process down. They screwed it up. Bovino and Noem screwed this up. Homan and Lyons and Rodney Scott, the head of Border Protection, had a plan that would have been efficient and would not have overwhelmed the system and gotten rid of all the people you and I want deported. And Noem and Bovino favored the show. They favored the spectacle. They favored the mass roundups that would get media attention. And who do they round up? A bunch of people who they haven't had plans for deportation for. And now I need to say something else. As a Christian, before I'm an American, before I'm a conservative, before I'm a Republican, before I'm a talk show host, before I'm a father, before I'm a husband, as a Christian, it offends my sense of fairness and justice that the United States government, which claims to be good, would round up a person and put them in a detention facility for a year and never move forward with deporting them, and then tell a judge, we're okay if you let this person out, but we're not going to unless you say so. That's neither good nor great. That's neither fair nor just. And that has happened in at least one case, and a judge in Minnesota says it's happening in other cases where they've rounded people up, put them in detention facilities, and have not even tried to deport those people. It was all for show. It was all for spectacle. And that is morally wrong. Welcome. This hour of the program is brought to you by Van Allen Golf. VanAllenGolf.com. It's ALLEN, VanAllenGolf.com. I got an email actually from a buddy yesterday who was asking me about these high-end, you've got Lab, you got Scotty Cameron, now you've got Van Allen Golf, and I agreed with him. I thought it was all hype. Because, these are not inexpensive putters, and you can get a very cheap putter if you want, but I've got my hands on one. I use one now. I had a nice PXG putter, and I have traded it in for my Van Allen Golf putter. The balance, the weight, the putter's the one thing in your golf bag that actually does most of the work. With the other clubs, it's your swing. With the putter, it's the weight and the balance, and oh my gosh, it's incredible. If you got somebody in your family who loves golf, give it a try. VanAllenGolf.com. Text golf to 33777, and you can get the links. Check them out on Instagram as well. Okay, there's news that you need to know. Panama has booted Chinese control from the Panama Canal. It's a big win for Donald Trump. The Panama Supreme Court has ruled that the concession held by a Hong Kong company to operate the ends of the Panama Canal was unconstitutional, and they have been booted from control of the Panama Canal, which was great because we know that the Chinese have been monitoring the entrances and exits of the Panama Canal. And they have been they have been monitoring ships and the cargo on ships and the sorts of ships. They can monitor American military movement. It is a massive win by the Trump administration to have the Chinese control booted out of the ends of the Panama Canal. Good for the Trump administration for fighting this. Old Glory Bank would like to be your bank. They're my bank. Got a checking account and a savings account with them. I've got friends of mine who have businesses, one of them a gun store who was getting in trouble with their big national bank because they're a gun store. They moved to Old Glory Bank. Haven't had any problems. In fact, Old Glory Bank has been very, very great with them on business lending issues. You should check them out. They're about to be publicly traded on NASDAQ. They're moving out of they're going through a de-SPAC. And they're going to be publicly listed on NASDAQ. They're one of the fastest growing banks in the country. They're online, headquartered in Oklahoma City. They're online, but they feel like a local bank branch. They're easy to get on the phone. They have a great app. They're very hands-on with businesses. You can deposit cash. They figure that out. I got the app on my phone, can generate a QR code at my local CVS, actually, is one of the places. They scan the QR code. I give them the cash. It gets pretty instantly deposited into my checking account. It works. They work. They're great. OldGloryBank.com/Eric. Need a custodial account if you're a veteran, first responder, active duty military. They got great discounts for you. Mortgages, CDs. OldGloryBank.com/Eric. Member FDIC. Equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply.